to let people in.
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, The Path Back to School, Supporting Families and Children for the Next Transition, featuring Justyna Balzar. Today, Justyna will share some behavioral strategies to support children and their families with their transition back to school during these uncertain times, when it really seems like school plans are changing by the minute every day. Justyna is a Board Certified Behavior Analyst with a master's degree in education. She and her co-founder, Megan Cave, created the Hangout Spot, a behavior analytic social skills development center using the fundamentals of science to teach social smarts. Justyna has over 15 years of experience working with diverse learners up to 18 years of age in the home, school, and community. And you can access all the information from today's presentation, including Justyna's credentials, on our website, www.spednetwilton.net, and our Facebook page. Your moderators today are Eve Kessler, founder of SpedNet Wilton, and Carolina Corrigan. I'm Janine Kelly. Please feel free to ask questions at the end of this presentation. Just be mindful that it's an open forum, and so any questions you ask, try to be careful about confidential information if it's not something you want put out there. Also use the Q&A button instead of the chat, because with the Q&A we can keep track of what questions were asked and answered. And then lastly, any information provided in this webinar by the speakers or the moderators is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice, and the information, content, and materials are for general purposes only. I will type in the chat our website address and also our Twitter address for everyone. So with that being said, Justyna, I'm turning it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me back. I'm really excited. It's also kind of surreal because the last time I was speaking on this amazing platform, we were just transitioning into the summer and we were having conversations like, how do we survive the summer and how can we make long distance play dating work? And that seemed like it was yesterday. Summer just flew by and here we are again. We are at a new crossroads discussing a new transition that is probably even scarier and more uncertain than the last one we had. And how do we even begin to think about preparing for this new way of learning for our children? How do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare our kids? There's so much uncertainty, even with just the information that we've received from districts about the option of keeping our kids in online learning 5 days a week versus going to a hybrid model, and there being the potential of a shift back and forth as we go into the new school year. There's a lot to think about in terms of how we can best support our families and our children in this next transition. So today, I want to give you a framework, if I can get my screen to move, there we go. I want to give you a behavior teaching framework to utilize as you're thinking about preparing your child for whether that be 5 times a week in home and utilizing the distance learning or some sort of hybrid of going to school physically and sharing the learning environment in the home, to be able to teach the skills that they're going to need in order to set them up for success. So we'll go over the behavior teaching framework, and in behavior analysis, we call this behavioral skills training, and it's a package deal. So it's comprised of 4 steps. They need to be done together, but when done together, there is a huge body of research that supports the effectiveness of this teaching framework in helping learners to acquire new skills. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about, okay, how do we actually prepare our kids for what's to come? And we'll dive into each of these, and we may go back and pull from that teaching framework and talk about how we can apply that to teach some of these skills and prepare our children for some of these environmental changes using that framework. So let's start with behavioral skills training. As I mentioned, it's 4 steps. They need to be done together and in order for the learner to be successful with actually acquiring the skill. That being said, there is some flexibility to go back if there needs to be some reteaching that needs to occur, but they really work best when they are done in order. So the first one is to teach. And when we think about teach, we are talking about explaining, providing a rationale, providing examples of whatever that skill is that we're teaching. And it's great. Some kids are rule governed, and if you give them the rules of a certain situation, the boundaries, the parameters, if they have enough skills in their repertoire, they're able to, without any further teaching or instruction or modeling, able to apply that contextually. But for many kids, especially kids who have other barriers, just telling them the rules around something or telling them how to do it, even if they can recite that back to you and tell you exactly how that is supposed to work, doesn't necessarily mean that they are then going to take those skills and be able to apply them contextually in whatever environment they need to be applied to. So after we teach and provide that rationale, and again, if you have a verbal learner, you can have a verbal interaction back and forth, provide that rationale. If you have a nonverbal learner, you can create a visual social story that is still able to illustrate the point. So if we're talking about something as simple as hand washing, you can put together a series of pictures that, while you're explaining it, demonstrates the steps of hand washing. After we teach, we also want to model. So we want to take our child, our learner, and we want to actually show them and demonstrate how to perform the skill. So I'm going to continue using the hand washing example. If we were to model hand washing for a child, we would take them over to a sink with us, and we would do each step of hand washing as we explained it to our child. So we've got the teach, we've got the model. All very great, but with any skill that we learn, whether that be reading, writing, math, learning to ride a bike, or learning how to swim, we need to be able to practice. So we need to provide our learner, our child, opportunities to actually practice doing that skill. So again, if we go back to the hand washing example, we can then, after modeling, have our child have a turn doing it. And we're giving them feedback. So if they are doing it correctly, we're providing tons of praise and reinforcement. If they're doing most of it correctly, but they're missing a step, we may go back in the framework and maybe we might model, or maybe we might verbally correct until we get it down to whatever that criteria is of what we want it to look like. So it's a very simple but powerful framework to take whatever we're teaching and have our children actually be able to apply it in that context, which is so important, because I hear so many times that kids can tell you the rules of something, but then they fall short when it actually comes to performing those rules in the environment. So keep this framework in mind as we go over some of these ways that we can prepare our families and our kids for this new school year. So if you haven't already, I would highly encourage you to start talking about school with your kids. If your kids are watching TV, I know my child was watching a lot of TV this summer. They have likely already been exposed to the myriad of ads that are talking about back to school. So whether or not you started this conversation, whether or not your child is aware of time passing on a calendar, they've already probably seen and heard that back to school is coming, whether that be from someone or on TV. start having that conversation with your kids and listen to their concerns. This is really important because it will give you insight into the things that maybe they're anxious about or they're struggling with, and will help you then to better prepare them for those things before they come up. So you can use, again, that framework to help teach whatever those skills are. So watch how they respond when you bring school up. What does their tone of voice tell you? What does their body language tell you? And for nonverbal learners, you can simplify this language and look at their body language, look at their behavior. So are they running away from you when you're talking about school? That's usually a sign that there's something going on there, right? Some sort of anxiety, something that makes them nervous, perhaps a bad experience, or perhaps with all of this uncertainty that's been going on around us, and how, you know, our lives as adults have been flipped upside down with everything we know. But for kids who are just growing up and learning the rules of social interactions, that has entirely been flipped upside down. So that could be causing a lot of anxiety too. Really powerful, sounds super simple, but start having that conversation with your kids and listen and watch on how they react, because that'll give you very important clues. Also, when we're talking with our kids, and in front of our kids, it's important that we focus on the positive of whatever the reality is. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We as adults are anxious. We don't know how we're going to manage childcare and school, and whether that be transportation to and from, and all of these different things. Try not to have those conversations that show that you're anxious in front of your child, because they will internalize that. And try your best to focus on the positive of what the reality is. So they will get to see their friends if they're going to do a hybrid version. It's going to be a lot different. So there's other things that we're going to discuss in order to help prepare them. They will get to see their teachers. They will get a break from home if they're doing the hybrid model, something that both parents and kids need, quite frankly. And then if they're staying home, there's, you know, as difficult as this has been for everyone, there have been so many hidden blessings in being able to do things with our kids and teach our kids things that we wouldn't have time to do had we been in school pre-COVID, right? So functional things like how to empty a dishwasher, I'm sure many of our kids love, and hey, in some cases they do show interest to those types of things. How to vacuum, how to help out around the house, how to be more independent with things around the house as mom and dad are working for some parents. So there are positives and benefits as much as it's difficult to both scenarios. A shorter school day, more time to play during the day at home, also a benefit for kids, something that they look forward to. So when you're talking about school and what's to come with your kids, try your best to focus on the positive. We want to minimize that anxiety for them going back. If you haven't already, school, at least in Norwalk and in Stanford, I believe starts on the 8th of September. Work towards setting morning and evening routines. So obviously during the summer, there's a lot more flexibility. Kids go to bed later, they wake up later. That whole structure is very different from what it looks like when they're going to school. So, you know, it's best to start that process gradually, maybe half an hour at a time. Okay, every day we're going to go to bed a few minutes earlier. By the end of the week, we'll work up to a half hour, then an hour, depending on how late your child is going to bed. If your child is going to bed at like 2 in the morning, then you got to make that process a little steeper in order to get back to a regular routine. But whether your child goes back to school in a full distance learning model or a hybrid model, pick a set time for all 5 days of the week where your child will wake up. Because that helps with the predictability, and we all crave predictability. And right now, part of what's causing everyone so much anxiety is the fact that we feel like we can't control our environment. So let's work on creating predictability where we can and setting our children up with a morning and evening routine, like having them lay out their clothes the night before, maybe adding something special to their morning and nighttime routine to reinforce them doing it. So perhaps at night, we have dinner, you go shower, you brush your teeth, you lay out your clothes, and then maybe we can read a fun story, whatever it is that you want, or we can play some Legos together before you go to bed. Something that allows your child to relax and wind down. Similarly, in the morning, if the routine is we're going to wake up, we're going to brush our teeth, we're going to have breakfast, whatever order that happens in, after you get all of your stuff ready, maybe you can watch something for a few minutes before you have to get on the bus, or whatever the case is. So find ways to make that morning and evening routine pleasant, because that's going to alleviate a lot of anxiety for both you and your child. If everything is laid out, that's one less thing to worry about. If everybody is waking up at a set time, that's one less thing to worry about. Now, keep in mind, this might not all happen overnight, right? That's why I think it's very important that we start this process gradually and we fade things in, so that when we actually do go back to school, we don't feel like there's this mountain between us and where we need to get our kids in order to set them up for success on the day-to-day. So in addition to setting up routines, we need to work on talking to our kids how we're going to interact with others when they actually physically return to school. It's going to look a lot different. We're not going to be hugging. There's all of those physical interactions that were done before by kids are now replaced with social distancing. So we need to be realistic with our kids, and we also need to prepare them and give them opportunities to think of alternate ways that they can still have these social interactions. Because when our kids don't know what to do instead, they may resort to doing what they've always done, and that is not going to be necessarily socially acceptable anymore for the time being. So challenge your child to come up with new greetings. It sparks creativity and fun. It challenges them to think outside the box. Again, it allows for continued social connection with others, and it gives children another piece of control, right? So when we think about where anxiety comes from, when I think about what I get anxious about myself, it's things that I can't control. So if I can figure out the pieces that I do have control over, the other pieces that are the outliers are a lot less scary if I can create some predictability. So if we're thinking about how to teach new greetings, you can, if your child needs a little bit more practice, you can go back to that framework that we talked about. You can model different greetings for them. You can have fun role playing them. You can practice them with others before they actually go to school, so they become fluent in these types of greetings and interactions. It's one less thing to think about. So it takes that stress off of going into school and not being able to do the things that they previously did and not knowing what to do instead. Okay. So this is our reality. we also have to review safety measures. If your child is going to be attending and taking part of a hybrid model, hybrid learning model, they are going to have to be wearing masks in school. They are going to have to practice social distancing, and they are going to have to know how to wash their hands properly in order to maintain their own safety and the safety of others. So presumably, everyone has had a lot of practice, but if your child is still struggling with any of these things, think about that behavior framework that we talked about as a way of trying to get these things more fluent and to come more naturally to kids, because they don't come naturally to us, right? Except for hand washing. That should, after enough teaching, that should come naturally to everyone. But social distancing and mask wearing are counterintuitive to how we've always lived our lives. So it's going to take some practice, especially when kids are going to school and they have to do it for longer periods of time. If we think about the durations in which they've had to wear masks over the summer, they've been short spurts. Right? So maybe you've taken your child on a walk or to the beach or to the grocery store, and all of that maybe lasted 45 minutes to an hour. We're talking about a full day. So if your child is apprehensive about mask wearing, doesn't like to do it for long periods of time, or has some sorts of sensory issues with certain types of masks, there are tons of options out there. There are masks that go behind the ears with adjustable straps. There are masks that go around your head, clear masks, masks that button up to your head. I mean, at this point, people have thought of everything. So explore those different types of things and have your child be a part of that process, because if they have to wear a mask, they should be able to select one that's going to be most comfortable for them, because that's what's going to make them most successful in being able to actually wear it and tolerate it in that environment. If your child is having severe problem behaviors around any of these things, highly encourage you to reach out to a professional who can better assist in individualizing a program and assessing your family's needs, where they can help pick the best solutions for you and your family. But if there's mild resistance, if there's just resistance to textures, or a matter of not knowing how to wear or how to perform these things, you can use that framework to try and get these things to be easier and more fluent. I hate to say more fluent, because I never want mask wearing to be fluent, but this is the reality that we're living in today. Another thing that we can do is identify similarities and differences for our kids. So have them be a part of the conversation, and if they can't be, you can certainly illustrate that for them with pictures. What's going to stay the same? What's going to change? What are we not sure about? It helps to provide some sense of predictability and control, which again is really, really important. So, maybe the similarities are that a child will still take the bus to school, but the difference is that they're not going to be sitting right next to someone. And maybe the similarity is that you're still going to see peers and teachers in school, but there's going to be a lot more space in between. So talking about these things with your kids helps them to be more aware of what to expect, which is really important. And also to be able to communicate to you what their fears and apprehensions and worries are as it relates to some of these things. Another thing that I highly encourage everyone to do is teach your kids coping strategies. I've definitely had to relearn some of my own this summer. But especially if they're going to be participating in a hybrid model of learning, there may be points in the day that will get overwhelming for them, and they need to know things they can do to help ease their anxiety, ease their fears, who to talk to, when to talk to that person, how to talk, how to ask for help. All of these things are really important. And again, you can go back to that framework and select things that would be most meaningful to your child, and teach them and model them and practice them and give them feedback. Trial a variety of different things. Deep breathing is something that everyone can do. Counting is something that everyone can do. I'm sure there will be opportunities to take breaks in schools and areas where you can do that. So teach them how to ask for that, and teach them who they can go to ask for that. Really important, because there will likely be times during the day where they need to utilize coping strategies in order to get to the next task. Okay, teach flexibility. This is all around important throughout and has always been for our lives, but now more than ever. Talk to your kids about what it means to be flexible. Model it for them. Label situations in which you are being flexible, and then practice it together. So again, go back to that framework, because if your child had a difficult time with unexpected changes pre-COVID, there are more unexpected changes to come than there have ever been before. So we want to prepare our kids for how to respond to those things. And teaching them, modeling them, and practicing that flexibility throughout the day is important. And all kids have some level of flexibility in their repertoire. Some kids are definitely more rigid than others, but in the same way that no child is bad 100% of the time, the kids are able to be flexible in certain situations. So if we can point those out to our kids when they're being flexible, also model our own flexibility, it'll help to build up and create that behavioral history of successes around responding to unexpected changes. Okay. And finally, adopt a team mentality. Have these conversations with your child, talk about what it means to be a part of the team. Certainly with whether your child is utilizing a hybrid model or working from home, it takes a team effort to be able to get them set up on their technology, make sure that if they are having trouble on technology while you're in the middle of a meeting, right? You're always working together. Listen to their concerns, empathize with them. As hard as it is for us, it's equally, if not harder, for them. Reassure them that everything's going to be okay, that you're going to work together towards a solution and problem solve that. So all of these are great skills to be actively teaching, modeling, practicing, and reinforcing with our kids, and will only further serve them beyond this pandemic. So use problem-solving language. If something unexpected happens, oh, that's a bummer that happened. Hey, let's figure out how we can solve that and make that better, or change the outcome of that, whatever that language is for your child. Hey, let's do that together. We're going to work together to make this work. Really, really important. It gives your child a level of feeling of a level of support, of predictability. Again, having someone there to listen, empathize, and reassure is something we all need. So really important. So as we come to a close and as we embark on this next transition, the one thing that I think is the most important thing for all of us to remember is that this is going to be a journey. It's going to constantly change. We are going to have to continue to adapt, and that'll be true for us and our children. And it's important that we give ourselves and our kids grace to be able to do so. If not everything's going to be perfect every day, there are going to be bumps and days that are better than others. Take it as it comes, prepare for what you can, focus on the positive, and give each other grace. And with that, I'll open up to questions.
So you have 2 questions. I don't know if you can see them, but one is, how can we help children read social cues when masks with everybody wearing masks?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one solution is, and we can't guarantee this for everyone, right, is there are clear masks available. So, you know, if your child relies on using their facial expressions to communicate with others, you can certainly utilize purchasing a mask. Now, we can't guarantee that everybody is going to have a clear mask. So practicing what those skills are, practicing nonverbal communication. Something we do at the Hangout Spot is we like to play barrier games. And what a barrier game is essentially, and this can be scaffolded to be really, really complex for more complex reading more complex social cues, or really simple, such like as a head nod or a head shake, a thumbs up, or a thumbs down. And you can do this, you can play this with your child. It's a lot of fun. So you put some sort of barrier in front of you and your child, and each of you has a number of the same objects. So perhaps I have a block and a pencil and a doll. I don't know, I'm pulling random things, and your child has those same things, and you take turns. So one person might pick something and say, okay, I'm ready. And then your child will have to hold up each of those things and wait for you to respond with a nonverbal cue. So if your child has trouble with more subtle cues, you might start with a head shake or a head nod, which would then clue them into whether or not they got it correct. If you give them a head shake, they have to pick another item, and you're going to hold it up. And so you can kind of practice with that and make it more difficult as you go. That's one way to practice reading other types of body language cues. You can certainly also, it doesn't hurt to ask the teachers that are working with your child if there's a possibility for them to wear clear masks. Perhaps that's something that can even be made as a donation to the classroom if your child really relies on it, or even be a part of your IEP process. If you're going into a PPT and you know that your child relies on those types of cues and you're not able to teach them to respond to others, that might be an accommodation. We are living in really different times, and if that's what a child needs, then that might be something that's worth discussing with your team.
So we have another question. Do you have any tips for a new middle schooler doing full remote on how to stay connected to peers and the school, and how can I and the school support them socially and emotionally?
Oh goodness. Okay, there's a couple of questions in there. So I would encourage if your middle schooler has a group of peers that they interact with on some level, teaching different ways of doing kind of long distance hangouts, not play dates. We're talking about a middle schooler here. Got to adjust my language. There are many things interactive ways of games that you can play on Zoom for a middle school level. There's Netflix party. There's all sorts of ways to stay connected with others. As far as how to support a middle schooler social or emotionally, have those conversations, talk about their fears, their apprehensions, work together to try and problem solve those if your child needs help. Similarly, pre-COVID, if you if you want to schedule some sort of hangout, as the weather still remains warm, there's also opportunities for families that are comfortable to do hangouts outside that are socially distanced. So there's plenty of games that can be played that are socially distanced. Cornhole is one of them. There are ways to set up interactions for our little ones, for our middle schoolers, those going into high school, whether that be in person, socially distanced, or virtually. There are many, many ways to stay connected. I hope I answered all of those.
There is one in the chat here. So coming about lunch be in the classroom, and this child used to have lunch bunch. Mm-hmm. And with everybody eating in the classroom and time will be lost, any suggestions for alternatives? She thought maybe an outside at a picnic table. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely a conversation worth having with your team as far as what options could be. Brainstorm different solutions together, see what would be acceptable to your team. It really depends on what the structure of the classrooms is going to be and what rules schools are going to put in place. Now, obviously, if your child has an IEP, if you go back to PPT and you confer with your team, certain exceptions can be made. But I would start off with having that conversation with your team, because you really need to get a better sense of what the choices are for in school before you can make a decision as to how that could be modified.
All right, great. Usually I'll give it a few minutes here. Okay. Social stories are great, but how to best depict erratic schedules that could result because there are COVID exposures, meaning suddenly no school for 5 days, back in 2 weeks, back in and out, etc. Mm-hmm. I guess how do you deal with that? How to best deal with that schedule changing all the time?
Yeah, so one of the things I think is very important is that we practice how to adapt to changes. So there are, throughout the day, we can let our child know that we're going to be practicing unexpected changes. And sometimes you may do or say something unexpected, and we're going to actively practice how we're going to respond to that. As far as preparing children for, shifting back and forth between models, start having the conversation with them that it may be something that could happen, and talk about the whys of the reason behind it happening, right? So if we were to go back to full-on distance learning, as opposed to the hybrid model, there are going to be specific reasons why that decision is made, depending on how old your child is and how much they're able to understand. I would have those types of conversations. And then again, try and focus on the positive and work together. Okay, if we do have to do that, here's what it would look like, and here's what we would do together to make that work. The reality is that there is going to continue to be changes and shifts, I would imagine, as we go into fall and into the flu season. So there's no one specific thing that I can say in order to help prepare our kids. It's something that we have to be actively working on, modeling and practicing every single day, so that when those big changes do happen, we have some of those skills to be able to respond to them in a more effective way.
I don't see any any more right now, but we'll
Okay.
give it a minute. Somebody might be typing.
No worries. Yeah, it's really hard because there's no denying the level of unpredictability that we're still facing with going back to school. So we just have to do our best to try and practice and model these things on the daily and hope that when it actually comes to needing to utilize those skills, we're going to, it'll be that much easier and we're going to be able to demonstrate them.
Yeah, I think that's, like you said before too, it's so important to reach out to your school team if something's not working or you have suggestions or what it's going to look like. You know, now it's really time to open that conversation with your team.
Yeah.
If your child has a team.
Absolutely. And you know, that I feel like has been one of the positives of this whole distance learning is it's brought families and teams closer together because you rely on that daily communication in order for families to support staff and staff to support families. So you're having more frequent conversations. And I think that this is just another one of those things that could really help bring you and your team closer together and help to make the year as successful as possible for your child. So that's really, really important.
Yeah, I don't see anything else. Anybody else want to add something? Janine?
Yeah, let me unmute myself.
Oh, you're beeping.
Oh, you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So we do have another webinar coming up. This has been wonderful, Justyna. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
We have another one coming up next week on August 25th, also along the lines of coping with uncertainty with Dr. Mary Murphy. So just wanted to put that out there. It's Tuesday, August 25th from 10 to 11. Check out our SpedNet Facebook page for more detailed information about that.
I have a question just roll in here. Sorry, Janine.
Yeah, no worries.
How do you get your child to talk about their anxiety?
Yeah, so that's hard, right? Because not every child will want to talk. But just because a child doesn't talk doesn't mean that they won't listen. And sometimes body language and behavior will tell us what we need to know. So if you're having conversations around your child and your child is, you know, running away from you from those conversations, then there needs to be more work to be done there. But if you're trying to have those conversations and your child is just not responding, they are still there, right? They're still internalizing and listening. It may take time for them to process. It may take time for them to find the words. So many times we feel like our kids aren't listening to the things that we're saying, especially when we are having conversations that we don't necessarily want them to hear. They are listening and they are internalizing it. So if your child doesn't want to talk about it, that doesn't mean or doesn't want to reciprocate the conversation with you, that doesn't mean that you still can't talk about it with them. Show them, whether that be verbally, reading books with them on the topic. I'm sure there are books on this topic at this point as well. The amazing power of Google. Still have those conversations because you'd be surprised at how much your kids are actually listening.
Yeah, I don't see anything else coming in right now. So
This has been great, Justyna. Thank you so much. Just a reminder, the PowerPoint and this webinar, which is being recorded, will be posted on our various outlets, Facebook and our website. So go ahead and take a look at that if you want to review any of the information or print the PowerPoint. It's been very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me back. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll close out.
Sounds good.
All right, bye. Thank
Bye,
you so
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Bye.